Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christina Hunter, and I'm the Dean and Director of University Towers and Guest Services here at Andrews University. And we want to welcome you to the webinar that will be discussing the reopening plans for Andrews University, especially as it relates to graduate students. We want to be able to provide you as much information as we can as you are getting ready to return back here in the fall and as we're ready to welcome you. I just want to begin with a quick verse to 2 Timothy 1:7. It says, "For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and of a sound mind." And that is what we want to be able to share with you today. So before we begin, let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for bringing us together through this incredible journey that we're still going through together. But God, we know that you are the finisher of this race. And as long as we continue to stay in your hands, you will guide us through the way. Be with all of our students, our graduate students especially, and guide us through this conversation as we learn more about how we'll be ready to go through this journey in our academics here at Andrews University in the fall. In your name we pray. Amen. Well, first I'd like to introduce to you the panelists that will be a part of our discussion today. First, we have representing our administration, Dr. Christon Arthur, our university provost, and he will be introducing the 3 guiding principles for our reopening plans. Representing student life will be Steve Yeagley, our assistant vice president for student life, and he will be discussing preparing for life here at Andrews in this fall. For our academics, we have Dr. Alayne Thorpe, Dean of the College of Education and International Services, as well as the Dean for Graduate Studies here at Andrews University. And she will be talking about preparing for learning at Andrews this fall. Representing our campus safety is our director, Ben Panigot, and he will be discussing how the university is preparing for your safety. For enrollment, Jillian Panigot, director of graduate enrollment, and she will be discussing all of the enrollment and reminders and everything you need to know about making sure that you're ready to start in the fall. So we'll begin with Dr. Arthur as he discusses the 3 guiding principles. Dr. Arthur.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Hunter, and to all of our graduate students. As you make your plans to return to campus, we are eager and with great expectations, looking forward to your return. This past few weeks and months, the campus has been almost muted. Some might say even neutered because you're not here. The vibrancy that you bring to campus, we've missed that tremendously. And we look forward to when you're going to return and bring your zest, your passion, your panache, your great exuberance for life and for learning. We look forward to that. But as we get ready for you to return, there are some 3 guiding principles. I'm going to share my screen. 3 guiding principles that we want to bring to your attention. So our reopening plan is maybe undergirded by those 3. The first has to do with a sense of community. I'll expand on that in a minute. The Andrews community. We are a community of believers, a community of scholars, a community of learners. But there's a tie that binds us together as we are part of this community. It's a community that pays great attention to safety, your safety and mine. And we'll talk about what that safety would look like. And we want to be inclusive. We strive to be inclusive. And we'll talk about ways in which that spirit of inclusivity would inform the plan that we have. So this whole sense of community, we want to ground our reopening with this concept of a community covenant. We are people of the book. We are people of the word. And covenant has special meaning for us. And we want our community to be guided by that covenant. The covenant that says the life of the other is as significant and even more significant than our own lives. We exist for our community. There is a Ubuntu saying, I am because you are. Because you are, I am. Which suggests that without you, there's no me. Without your presence, my presence is diminished. I cannot have full and complete humanity and human experience without validating and nurturing and nourishing your own humanity. I think Paul had it right in Philippians when he said, look towards the interest of others and make those interests as important or even more important than our own interests. And this is the sense of this community covenant. What we're saying as part of this community is, my presence here will do everything it can to enhance and nurture and improve the experience and the presence of others. This covenant will guide our reopening. It's not all about me. It's about the us and the we who are part of community. And that takes us to the whole idea of safety. Because we're going to look out for the best interest of others. Our safety is based upon the idea that I will do things not only to preserve my safety and my rights, I'll do things to enhance the safety and the rights of others. So as a university, we'll do testing to have some baseline data so that we know who we have in terms of the covered health situation within that community. We'll monitor to make sure that we keep that healthy status for every person. We'll do contact tracing so that if a person had exposure, we'll find out who might have been those who were in close contact, and we'll trace to make sure that those persons' health and safety are protected. We'll do physical distancing. Even within our classrooms, our common spaces, we will make sure that we keep those distances that's appropriate to mitigate the spread of the virus. We will wear face coverings. I don't like it. I think it's a little bit of a hindrance when we wear face coverings. And if you're like me and you have a particular kind of accent, it makes it even more difficult to be understood with a face covering. But it goes back to this community covenant idea. It's not all about me. So I wear it not for me. I wear it for us. I wear it for our own protection. And I know that because I'm part of the Andrews community, I'll do what's best for the community, not just what I think is convenient for me. So we will all be wearing face coverings in common spaces, in our classrooms, when we go to chapel, when we have our co-curricular activities, we will wear face coverings. We'll do the right thing. We'll clean up after ourselves. We'll do the courteous thing. Within our classrooms, when we use the spaces within our classrooms, we'll use the materials and equipment that we provide to you, and we'll clean those surfaces so that the next student, the next faculty, the next person who would use that space has a clean space. So we'll clean up after ourselves. And where appropriate, we'll use other kinds of protective equipment. And we reduce our classroom capacity to 50% because We want to create the space and the distance so that a virus which might be in the air for a little while would have no human contact. We'll do all of those things to take care of our safety. We'll be inclusive. Each person would have their own experience. You might have a good documented reason why it might be difficult for you to come back and be part of the physical activities, interactions at the university. You may want to remain remotely and connect the university this way. And we want you to be part of the Andrews experience. We hope that you'll be here with us in this lush paradise called Berrien Springs, but maybe you can't. And we'll accommodate to make sure that if you have to stay at home, whether it's domestically or internationally, we'll make the accommodations that you can still be part of the Andrews experience. We think that experience is so powerful and so important. We'll do everything we can to make sure you're part of the Andrews experience. And so make contact with VP Michael Nixon. Talk about what your accommodations needs might be. If you can't be here with us, we'll have a cadre of classes. We'll have a slew of different course offerings that we may say, these are the ones that are available to you. And as you register for those from a distance, from remote, you can still be part of the rich Andrews experience. Why? We're not the same without you. Andrews is what it is because of you, our students, and especially because of our graduate students. So, in closing, we do all of this because we want to enhance the Andrews experience. We want to enhance your learning. We want you to know we exist because of you. You are the life, the heartbeat, the hands and feet of Andrews University. You are our mission personified. And so, our dear students, as you make plans to return, know that Andrews University will do everything we can to ensure that that experience that you have is a great experience. And I can't wait to greet you from a distance. You will not be close-up hugs because of the COVID-19, but to greet you from a distance and to say to you as you walk by, welcome home. This is your home. We are prepared for you. And home is where you should be. Looking forward to greeting you when you return, whether in person or virtually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arthur, for that excellent overview. I just want to spend a few minutes expanding on a couple of the items that Dr. Arthur talked about as we think about what life will look like during the fall semester. So let me begin with testing because that was mentioned early on. In probably, I think next week it will be, you will receive some information from Dean Alyssa Palmer, who is coordinating our COVID testing on campus. And she'll be giving you some options as to when to arrange for your testing. Some of you here in the community already may do that earlier, and those who are arriving later will be doing that at the very beginning of our orientation week. So just so you'll know what to expect, the test will be a nasal swab test. This is one of the more invasive COVID tests that are done, but we are using it because it is perhaps one of the more accurate tests that we can get, and we want to be as accurate as possible. It will take about 36 to 48 hours for the lab, once they receive your swab, to get those results back to the university. And at that time, if your test is negative, you will be cleared to engage in campus activities. We're not only doing this for students, our faculty and staff, in fact, are starting today undergoing testing as they begin to return to work. So we're all in this testing together. and whatever small discomfort we'll experience together. Some have asked in previous webinars why it is that we're not testing students before they come to campus. And so I thought I'd answer that up front. The reason for that is probably threefold. First of all, the availability of testing, not only across the country, but around the world, is not always reliable. It's difficult sometimes to get a test in certain areas of the country. And so that's a problem. The affordability of testing, in some places it's free, and in others it is not. We are able to offer this test to you at no additional charge to you. So, and then finally, there can be a delay in getting results, sometimes up to 9 to 10 days. And so by the time you've been tested and you have your results in hand, there's all kinds of other exposure that could take place. And so for all of those reasons, we've decided to test students when they arrive on campus. Just a couple other notes. We are going to give every student a welcome kit that's going to include a couple of branded face coverings, so you can fly the Andrews colors while you're being safe. They'll also include a thermometer and some cleaning supplies for your apartment or wherever you're residing. We'll also be asking every student to download an application onto their phone, faculty and staff as well. And our new daily routine will include some self-monitoring for symptoms, for our temperature. We'll be logging that before we begin our day. And then our COVID-19 tracing team will have a good picture on their dashboard of where we may have difficulties arising. And of course, if you do have symptoms, you do have a temperature, we're going to ask you to stay at home and to contact us. And on that note, I might add, if we do find that someone has tested positive, or perhaps you've had contact with someone who has been positive, some significant contact, we're going to ask you to quarantine if you're positive. And that would be done in your apartment if you're living on campus, or in your residence off campus. And if you are someone who's been in contact with someone else, we'll also be asking you to isolate and then eventually test. So those are some of the isolation procedures that we'll be using. I should also mention that it's going to be very, very important for all of us to take care of our health and well-being, and to build our immunity and keep our immune systems healthy. And this is going to mean everything from sleep hygiene to good nutrition to getting regular exercise. Mental health has also become a real concern during these pandemic times. And we want to stress that our counselors at the Counseling Center will continue to be available to students during this time. And so you can reach out to them and find support there. And of course, just being kind to ourselves and kind to one another during a time like this can do a lot to boost our mental health. So those are just a couple of things on the well-being side. Some of you are wondering, is the Wellness Center going to be open? And we have this brand new beautiful facility that we have had to close for several months. And we are waiting for our governor and our local health officials to give us clearance. And we will reopen when the time is right. In the meantime, our staff there they are running outdoor exercise sessions, and we will look forward to seeing you at those. And of course, we have beautiful grounds here at Andrews University, and many of us are enjoying those, taking walks, running, and all of that is going to continue to be available for your health. When it comes to student activities on campus, you should expect that the activities are going to be smaller. Some of them, many of them, may be held outdoors where it's safer. And so we won't be getting together for large gatherings. Sporting activities at the moment have been ceased, and we don't anticipate, at least at the beginning of this semester, to have any intramural play or intercollegiate games. And so we'll have to be turning to other forms of individual recreation to satisfy our recreation needs. When it comes to spiritual activities, I'm pleased to announce that our church has a reopening plan, and that has been put into effect. We've had services now for a couple of weeks, and there's a limited number of people who've chosen to return to worship. Others continue to enjoy worship online. And so both of those options are going to be available to students when you return. We expect both Pioneer Memorial Church as well as our 2 campus fellowships to be reopened with safety protocols in place for the beginning of the school year. So those are just a few notes I would add. On the housing front, if there's anyone listening today who is already in university housing or even in housing in the community, and you have questions, particularly around rent, the affordability of housing during these times, we'd really like to invite you to tune in again for another webinar with our Vice President for Student Life at 2 p.m. today. You'll find the presentation streaming live on the Facebook page, just as this one is. And I think that you'll find that helpful if you have questions about your rent and the affordability of staying in either campus housing or community housing. So that's just an overview of a few things that you can expect in student life. And I'm sure there'll be questions. Be sure to put those in the comments or in the Q&A box here on Zoom, and we'd be glad to answer them. But in the meantime, let me turn this over now to Dr. Thorpe, who will speak about learning on the campus.
Well, I just want to echo both remarks made by Dr. Yeagley and Dr. Arthur. If there's one thing that all of us here at Andrews University share, it's that we are missing our students, especially our graduate students, who add to the vibrant life, make Andrews the place that it is, especially the place of learning, because not only do you come to Andrews to learn, but you add so much to our community, because you become really a community of scholars who contribute to the knowledge of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and of every field in which you enter. So you are extremely important to us. As we've mentioned before, your safety is extremely important to us and of our primary concern right now. But it really doesn't take a second place to community. So let's talk a little bit about community of learning and what we're doing for you. We hope that you'll be able to come on campus. We are preparing for you. Faculty are prepared for you. They're looking forward to seeing you again. We will make it possible for you. We will have classrooms that set up to accommodate students and to make it possible for us to social distance in the classrooms. Dr. Arthur and Dr. Yeagley have talked to you a little bit about some of the processes like wearing masks, especially in common areas, and how we will try to provide social distancing even in the classrooms. And unfortunately, between you and the professors, that doesn't mean that you can't ask questions or that you can't participate fully in the class. We want you to participate fully in the class. You'll be able to do so, but just from a little bit of a distance. We also plan to make it possible so that classrooms will be cleaned, we will ask you to clean before you leave, and the students who are there before you will also clean before they leave. So there will be a double cleaning. And we're making, as you already know, some adjustments to the schedule. For example, the university at Thanksgiving time, you will go home. And even though the university semester will not end because we will continue with remote session to some extent, those of you who have final exams or who have teachers who decide to offer a final exam may have the final exam before Thanksgiving, but in many cases you may not. It'll be very important for you to look at your syllabus. I know that the seminary has been discussing having finals after and doing them remotely. These are all things that we are looking at doing. We want to also let you know that while we would like for you to be here, we really would like for you to be here. We really want to be able to see you. And even though, like Dr. Arthur and Dr. Yeagley, I will also be wearing a mask, I want to be able to say hello to you as well from a safe distance, social distancing, so I can protect you, not just so that I can be protected, but so that I can protect you. We will make it possible if you cannot come on campus, or if there is a problem, for example, if you have to quarantine, for your courses to be delivered the majority of graduate courses will be delivered both online and remotely. This is especially true of all of the programs in the seminary, the College of Education, many of the programs in the College of Health and Human Services, and in the College of Professions, the Masters in Business. So almost all of our graduate programs will be delivered both in person and remotely, and all students are able to take advantage of that if you need to. One of the ways that you can let us know if you need to, especially if you're an international student and you cannot come because of either visa issues or travel restrictions, just contact your advisor. And your advisor will work with you very closely. Even programs that are face-to-face programs will have a remote option. We'll have a remote option for almost every course. We also want you to know that you will have access to the library, both in person if you're on campus, but also with some social distancing guidelines. But also the library has many research capabilities and resources that are available to you remotely. You'll be able to access them. The university has been working over the summer in improving internet connection, especially in graduate student apartments, making it easier for you with better internet connection speeds if you're living in the community. We also are working very hard to make it possible for those of you who are working on projects, you're at the place where you're ready to defend your dissertation or talking about trying to finish. We will be continuing our practice of doing virtual dissertations, defenses. This does not, and those have been actually quite wonderful, because what has happened is that students are able to invite many people who cannot come on campus, but who are able to connect virtually. We had one dissertation defense with about almost 50 people who came to watch and celebrate. And when the committee went into executive session to discuss our findings, the family gathered around and had a wonderful reunion for about 15 or 20 minutes. And then when we came back, it was a good defense. She finished well. We had a big celebration. So there are some things that we can do online that enhance and contribute to our community, and we will keep on doing those things. So we want to let you know, because safety is our primary concern, and because we want to do everything we can to make sure that you're able to continue meeting your educational goals. We will be as flexible as we can be. We will provide you with the resources that you need to study both remotely and face-to-face, and in as many of our courses as will allow it. So all you need to do is contact your advisor. If you have any questions and you can't reach your advisor, please know that you can contact me as well. We'll have information, that contact information posted for you. I'm going to turn things over now to my colleague, Ben Panigot, to let him talk a little bit about safety procedures, and then just invite you to ask whatever questions that you have, because I'm sure you have many.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. From a safety standpoint, it's always great to see proactive students looking to identify some safety information. I wanted to talk to you briefly today about some of the efforts that we're working on across the campus to mitigate transmission risk from COVID. So a couple of those things. One, we're working specifically with our facilities to reduce transmission risks in a couple of areas. One, in our restrooms, replacing air dryers with paper towels to reduce the aerosolized aspect. We're installing foot poles on restroom doors. We're closing drinking fountains, but we're also ensuring that there are water bottle fill stations in the majority of all of our buildings. We're identifying doors that can be propped open while still complying with fire code. We're increasing the number of contactless hand sanitizer stations across the campus that will be equipped with an alcohol-based solution. We're also working with our custodial department to make sure that we have cleaning chemicals rated for COVID-19 and that those chemicals are available for our custodial department, for academic department, service departments across the campus, and even for all of your students to make sure you guys have the ability to clean your unique areas, as Dr. Arthur mentioned. We're also updating COVID-19 cleaning procedures regarding frequency and response cleaning as part of our infection control. Another aspect that you will see across the campus when you come is an increase in signage as it relates to COVID-19 and best practices and university expectations. Some of the signage will talk about screening for symptoms and exposures, reminders about face covering requirements or physical distancing. Some areas you'll see posted occupant loads that help us maintain that physical distance in spaces like lobbies and lounges. There's signage for importance of COVID-19 hygiene. And you also see some signage indicating that some areas may be closed, like a specific chair or a table that will help us create that physical distance in those areas. We're also working with our academic departments to make sure that classrooms are rated for the right occupancy and there's physical distancing in there as well. We're also working with departments across the campus on their return to work plans and procedures for the semester to come. And this is making sure that we're attempting the best ways to mitigate risks. And sometimes this means that some departments will be offering more remote services. And for services that need to remain in person, making sure that there's physical barriers in place or physical distance, as well as ensuring that the right PPE is deployed so that everyone's protected. We're also coordinating with Student Life and our HR department on several aspects. One of this is a robust contact trace program. And this is to make sure that we're identifying potential exposures and quarantining to reduce transmission risk. We're also working education and training opportunities to make sure our students and employees are updated and reminded on COVID-19 expectations. As Dr. Yeagley mentioned, we're also going to be issuing reusable cloth masks to every on-campus employee and student. We also have those student health kits that will also include a thermometer for every student to check their temperature. We are working with a third-party app called Calico that will assist us with our required daily symptom and exposure screening, where individuals will be asked to talk or to disclose, report any of their symptoms that may be related to COVID-19 and provide some directions on what next steps would include. The app also has access to an education portal. It will also help us correlate test results, symptoms, and user data from Banner, including class schedules or where people live, to help correlate that data to see if there's specific areas that may need more attention. We're also working with a third-party vendor, Origin, to provide testing for COVID that Dr. Yeagley talked about. The last piece of all of this is bringing all of our procedures and protocols together and ensuring that they meet both state government expectations and best practices. And to do that, we're taking our policies and we're having them reviewed with our local health department. We're getting input from our local hospital systems. And Andrews University also has a great College of Health and Human Services on campus. And so we're involving faculty from those areas who are subject matter experts to help ensure that we've addressed and mitigated risks every place that we can. We hope that we can do this to provide a safe experience for you as you return this semester. With that, I have a unique opportunity to turn this conversation over to my mom, Jillian Panigot, the Director of Graduate Enrollment.
Hi, thank you, Ben. I appreciate that charming introduction. And for all of you, I'm delighted that you've joined our webinar today. My name is Jillian Panigot, and I'm the Director of Graduate Enrollment Management. Some of you may still be shopping around for your program or your school, and I want you to know that this is a beautiful campus with a creative faculty and a caring staff who actually enjoy their work, and we like our students. In the Graduate Enrollment Office, we give you information about the academic programs you might be interested in, and sometimes we may even introduce you to one you haven't thought of. We help you connect with your program advisors, and we assist you in completing the application process. Some of you may have been admitted on a provisional basis, so that means perhaps you still owe us some documents, maybe your transcripts or letters of reference. There's many documents depending on the program you're applying to. So if you have questions on your application status and you don't know where you are or what else you need to do, then I invite you to send me an email at graduate@andrews.edu, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Or if I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who does, and we'll clear things up so that you know what your next steps are. Currently, all of the staff in Graduate Enrollment Management, we are working from home, and we're getting ready to move back on campus, just like you are, maybe. And we want you to know that we're excited to have our campus open again. We have missed our students through the summer, but we're ready to meet and welcome new students. And we're ready to warmly welcome back the students that we already know. And so I'd like to ask you to travel safely, make your plans, know that we're praying for you, and we'll see you soon from a safe but friendly distance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jillian, and thank you to all of our panelists who have provided some really amazing and great information and reminders for all of our graduate students as you are preparing to return in the fall. So I'm going to now take a look at some of the questions that you have, and we'll see if we can get some answers for you. Again, as we're going through this, please post your questions. Even if it's not a question that you may have, and maybe a friend may have had, or when you're having a conversation with some of your fellow graduate students and thinking about what they were thinking about, go ahead and post it if you're on Zoom in the Q&A below, or if you're on Facebook Live, go ahead and put it in the comment box and we'll be able to check it and see it too. So there's a really specific question here that I know that Dr. Arthur is going to answer as far as the spring. So I want to hold off on that, Dr. Arthur, one moment and just answer a few kind of housekeeping questions. A couple of questions have come up about the Calico app and kind of the implications of it. What is it going to look like? What is it going to do? How does it function? And how are students supposed to utilize this app? Is it on a daily basis, or how do they input information in there? So if any of you, and I'm thinking maybe Steve Yeagley may be able to answer this question, or Ben Panigot, about more specifics about the app and how students should use it.
Sure, I can jump in with the first part, and Dr. Yeagley, if you have anything else you want to add. So again, the app we're using is called Calico, and Calico offers both a mobile app that can be used on any mobile device, as well as a web-based platform for those that want to log in from a computer. Basically, what we are required to do is perform daily screenings, self-screenings of our symptoms and exposures. So every day, people that are accessing the campus, students and employees, will have to review symptom questions to ask if you're experiencing COVID-related symptoms. It will ask you to report your temperature, and it will also ask about possible exposures with people who may be COVID probable or positive. There are some concerns about what this app could also be used for, or data tracking. At this point, the app is only using data that is being provided by the university from the university's database system banner. So this would be data that includes class schedule or residence. So if someone were possibly exposed and we are looking for who else could be affected from a secondary exposure standpoint, it would help us understand who may live in the same building or the same area, or who may attend class together. It does not track your location. There isn't any way for us to know where people were from that perspective, but more about where they would normally be in their daily routines as it relates to university-related data. Other than that, the system administrators for the system will be able to seize those symptom reports And if there are any potential red flags for someone who may be sick, it will also start conversations for us to reach out to those students and employees to better understand their symptoms, give some proper direction, and where needed, also activate support services for those students or employees who may be isolated or quarantined to ensure that they still have the support they need to carry on, whether that be with the employment functions or with students, making sure that we're involving student success so that there isn't a lapse in their academic progress, working with faculty, working with campus ministries, counseling and testing student life, ensuring that the holistic support approach that we use for all of our students still applies during these COVID times. Dean Hunter, I don't know if that covers the majority of it, or Dr. Yeagley, if you have more to add.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to add to that, Ben, isn't so much about the functionality of the app, but just how we relate to those symptoms ourselves. You know, as flu season comes on, a lot of us are used to getting, you know, one symptom or another, maybe a scratchy throat, maybe a cough, maybe a slight fever. And, you know, in times past, we might have just pushed through that, right? We don't want to miss class. We would have just gone on and with our day and tried to make it through. It's going to be different this year. We'll be asking you not only to monitor those symptoms, but to respond to those symptoms in very specific ways. And usually that's going to be staying home and letting us know. We will have ways for you to reach out and to get medical advice when you need it. So that's just the difference between this flu season and last, you know, other flu seasons. And this really, as Dr. Arthur mentioned, is about protecting one another. And where maybe it is nothing, maybe it is just the cold or the flu, we don't want to take the chance that it's not and then spread COVID to one of our fellow classmates or to an employee. Yeah.
And if I could add on to that for those symptoms, so a couple of things. One, when anyone is sick, we want them to stay home. Regardless if it's COVID or the regular flu, we don't want to be spreading that around. So yeah, if you're sick, please stay home. What this app helps us identify is potential higher risk for possibly COVID. So you may be asked to stay home when you're sick, but there may be additional steps when it comes to isolation if it's COVID related. So we've worked directly with our local health department to come up with a symptom screening process that helps rule that out, where we look at high-risk symptoms as a single occurrence or combinations of low-risk symptoms. But it's going to help us rule out, for instance, somebody who's having maybe a bad allergy day from pollen in the air. But it's going to be a multifaceted approach to make sure that we are escalating where necessary.
And let me pose a follow-up question and either of you can respond. It's kind of a two-part. One, does a student need to take their temperature daily and then put that into the app? And then two, what about family members for our graduate students who live, let's say, in university apartments with their families? Do they need to also track their symptoms as well since they are living together?
Great question. So yeah, so the temperature, yes, that will be required to be put into either the app or the web-based platform. And again, we are providing thermometers to every on-campus student. It's a digital thermometer. The family part is a great question, Dean Hunter. And so there's two ways to look at this. Depending on what those family members' experiences are, they may be required to do their own type of screening, depending where they work or if they attend school. But one of the questions that we ask for our students is an exposure question, where it talks about, have you been around somebody in the last 24 hours who may be COVID probable? And that helps us account for those family members. So if a student is living with family and a family member gets sick, that question will help us screen that. And when it trips the value, one of our caseworkers can look into that and speak with the family and try to help understand what that indication means and if there's any further action that needs to take place. But we do want to factor that in as well.
Great. Thank you so much for answering those questions concerning the app and tracking symptoms. Now, another question that's been posed has to do with employment for students on campus. And they want to know, do the reopening plans pose any challenges to graduate student employment? Will they still have access to the same ability to be able to work on campus? If there's anyone that could answer that question.
So graduate students will be able to find some jobs. There are challenges, as you can imagine, to also all sorts of things, just as there are challenges with, the COVID has created disruptions across the board, but there will be opportunities for graduate student employment. We have had some graduate students who've remained employed over the summer and who've done very, very well. I can say that with confidence because the School of Distance Education is always looking for some good graduate students. So there will be opportunity for graduate student employment, but graduate students who are employed will also follow social distancing restrictions and may even look at some options, at least controlled ones, of working from home.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that question. Answered. So there was another question that got posed to me by a graduate student about events on campus, and especially specifically like church and worship services. And so many of our students are used to, of course, gathering and getting together, and they have a wide variety of church services that are available on campus. What will that look like in the fall? What will events look like and our worship gatherings look like this year?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, some of the protocols for that are just now emerging based on the recommendations from our governor of the state and local health officials. So let's deal with religious gatherings first because they are in kind of a separate category. As I indicated earlier, we are reopening our churches here on campus. Pioneer Memorial has already begun to have services for the last couple of weeks. They do have restrictions in place, protocols that they have been educating their congregants on. So you can expect to be able to go to church, but you'll be distanced, you'll be wearing a face mask, there will be no singing. Humming is actually what they are doing in Pioneer Memorial at the moment. So churches continue to gather, but the attendees are a lot fewer. And many are continuing or making the choice to go to church online still. And those services will continue to be available online throughout the fall semester. When it comes to social activities, there are some more stringent guidelines in place in our state. And you can expect that many of those gatherings are going to be much smaller. Currently, at the moment, outdoor social gatherings cannot be, I believe, any more than 100 individuals, and social distancing has to be in place. So the nature of social events, the type of events that we have, as well as the size of events, will be changing. And we're going to be discussing some of these protocols with our activity planners and keep them updated as the semester goes on. So expect some changes there as well as on the religious gathering front. I think that covers about what we know now.
Right. And Steve, while I still have you there was a question that came up about students who are going to be coming in and moving into the dorms and then getting tested. And then there's a waiting period of the time from they take the test to when they get those results. And I know that orientation kind of starts a little bit later to give them that time. But are there any suggestions for students who, let's say, have roommates who are going to be living in the dorms that, in that in-between time as they wait for their results?
Sure. Let me mention, first of all, that students will have the option when you go to Ranger housing to either live with a roommate, and we have also rooms that we can offer to students, just single rooms. They will be at 25% more, but it's reduced from where it was at 50% more last year. So we're thinking of roommates, and we're asking them to think of themselves as family units, which means they will be living together and holding one another accountable for good, safe, and healthy practices. But they will be like a family. During that 36 to 48 hour waiting period, we're calling it a limited contact period. It's not a strict quarantine. Students may leave their rooms, but we're asking them to limit their contacts and, of course, always remain safe with mask wearing and social distancing. And then at the end of that period, when we have results, we'll send students who are positive into quarantine, and others will go on with their school year. I noted that the questionnaire said that they have a student who is high risk. And I don't know exactly what that means medically, but if you believe yourself or your student, son or daughter, to be in a high risk category, I would really encourage you to contact our Dean for Housing, Jennifer Burrell, and discuss that with her and see what additional precautions may need to be taken because of that high risk status.
Absolutely. Thank you for giving us some more context of who we need to get in contact with when we have those type of concerns. Another question for the panel that was just posed: is our campus closed to non-students? Are we still able to bring our families or friends onto campus, within campus buildings, or into the library, or can they come and eat in the dining hall or in the cafeteria or in other buildings? So to anyone on the panel who may be able to answer that question.
So I can respond to part of that. Dr. Yeagley, I don't know if you want to cover the dining services piece after this, but the campus is open to pedestrians walking on our campus, to vehicles. There is not a checkpoint to gain access, so that is open outside of evening hours, which would be our traditional operation. We do ask that visitors and guests be limited, and where things are specific or essential for something to occur. During the move-in and new orientation, there are different expectations this year that Dr. Yeagley can probably talk better about, but we are asking that we do limit those guests and visitors so that we are reducing that transmission or exposure risk.
Okay, and it seemed like there was a bit of a follow-up to that question, saying that someone was asking for example, PMC attendees that are not affiliated with the school, would they be exempt from the community covenant? So would they be held to maybe a different set of standards, those who are guests who are just coming for like church or just coming onto campus, but not in a student capacity?
Sure. So when entering any building on campus, any university-owned building, there is an expectation that face masks are worn, or face coverings are worn, that individuals self-screen before entering the building. So even a guest, visitor, or contractor is expected to kind of go through that screening process. And if they think that they would answer yes to the questions posted on that signage, they should not enter. Pioneer Memorial Church operates a little bit independently of the university. And so they have some different expectations, but they're relatively similar to the universities. But for most of the Andrews buildings, those expectations would continue.
I think Ben covered it very well. Andrews University and PMC have a great partnership, but Pioneer Memorial Church is a Michigan Conference-operated church, and so they will follow the guidelines and requirements of the conference. We do share common spaces. Many of the Sabbath school classes at PMC are held in classrooms on the Andrews campus. So when those persons who are members of PMC, they want to attend a Sabbath school class in a classroom on the Andrews campus, they would have to meet our expectations as described by the covenant. Of course, we would not require them to be tested every weekend or to be tested as part of our protocol, but the other aspects of that covenant they would have to meet. But it will be a very close collaboration, and the expectations will be communicated both ways.
Thank you for that, Dr. Arthur. And even as a bit of a follow-up, a question I just see on the Facebook Live, will the churches that are, let's say, non-PMC church services, will they be operating at a 50% capacity as similar to our classrooms?
And so in addition to PMC, Andrews has 2 weekly fellowships, One Place and New Life. So the answer to that would be yes. And then there are other cultural groups that usually have monthly Sabbath services on our different amphitheaters. Those different cultural groups, I think there is a Korean worship that happens maybe monthly in one of our amphitheaters. All of those that, whether it's the weekly fellowships or the other routinely monthly services, would have to live up to the 50% capacity expectations.
And Dr. Yeagley, I think you may have something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the dining question because some of our graduate students, even if they're not living in a residence hall, may wish to access the dining services. As regards guests, we are not opening up our dining services to the community at this point. Guests from the community will be serving only students and employees and their immediate family members who are living with them. So you can expect that. When you do come to the dining center, you will not be going through buffet lines as we typically do. All of our meals will be associate served. There will be perhaps some choice about whether you get this or that, but it'll all be handed to you by an associate who's been trained. They're going through that training now so that the food and its delivery is just as safe as possible. There will be some limited seating in our dining center that will be partitioned with plexiglass so that it's safe for diners. And then we also will have, as long as it's possible, outdoor seating options as well. And then we expect some that perhaps our takeout will increase, and there will be many people who will take their food out and eat it elsewhere at home or perhaps back in their room. So those are a few of the changes that you can expect to see, at least as we begin the semester.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that information. Another question that is here, a student is asking, will the graduation date in December, so for students who are finishing out their semester in December, will that be adjusted to reflect kind of the new semester parameters?
So I'll jump in and say the semester is going to end, even though students won't be in in-person classes. The date for the semester to end is the same. So classes and grades and everything won't be posted until they would normally be posted, even if you were still doing face-to-face classes. What will stop before Thanksgiving is face-to-face classes. But your professors will let you know what will happen after Thanksgiving for that last week to 10 days. Some cases it may be a remote exam, and other cases it may be project. But we're very carefully monitoring that. So you're going to have the same amount of time for the course, and the semester will end as it normally would have. It's just that it will end in a different manner. And so the deadline for graduation in December, all of those deadlines still apply.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thorpe. We have a question about quarantining, and I think it would be great for someone to be able to address what happens, let's say, for example, if a student does become positive for COVID-19 or has the need to isolate or quarantine, what are the quarantining plans for the university, and how are we assisting students who may be living in the apartments and have a roommate and needs to be isolated for a specific amount of time?
So I can start that conversation again, Dr. Yeagley, maybe you can follow up. So I guess the first thing I want to clarify is the difference between isolation and quarantine. So first, isolation refers to an individual who is symptomatic, who has symptoms or is test positive. They would be put in isolation. Quarantine is used for individuals who are asymptomatic and may have been exposed to somebody else who may have COVID. So two different processes with several different types of expectations. So when we have somebody who requires isolation and they live maybe perhaps with somebody else, we do have isolation residents set up for those that live on campus, and that's a coordination with student life on relocating that student for that temporary isolation and the necessary support services for that as well. If there are individuals who are required to quarantine and they live with each other, as they both remain asymptomatic and have the similar exposure, again, this quarantine piece, they will most likely continue to stay living in that same arrangement together because they both face the same exposure risk. So that's how we would differentiate the two.
Okay, thanks, Ben. That's really helpful to understand the difference between those two. I guess my question would be simply, if someone does not live in university housing, in the residence halls, or in the university apartments, and needs to be isolated, should they be prepared to isolate within their own home if they're living in a community apartment or community house?
That's a good question. So one, I want to kind of clarify, we call it jurisdiction, but where the university realm exists. So obviously the university does not offer medical direction. We can offer expectations as it comes to the property. So people that are living off campus in the community, we may provide isolation direction. And as it relates to their local residents, this will have to be a discussion and case by case as we look at what the exposures look like in their own household. So individuals that live maybe at home with a family, there are CDC recommendations that talk about doing their best to isolate the individual from the rest of the family, but also recognizing that some support functions still need to occur. So this is where, as we become aware of these cases, that we want to work with these individuals to help understand what the setting is and how we can support. The other piece I would note is when the local health department or the Berrien County Health Department becomes involved. So in the state of Michigan, any individual who tests positive for COVID, the lab agency that's performing that test is required to report positive results. So at a point, one of our students or even family members of our students test positive in the state of Michigan, Berrien County, our local health department will become aware. And at that point of a positive test result, the health department will become involved and help provide additional guidance as it relates to isolation or quarantine off of that positive test result.
Thank you so much to Ben and Dr. Yeagley for answering those really, really important questions as it relates to quarantining and isolation and all this terminology that we're having to get used to, and it's kind of become our new normal, but it's important for us to continue to gain more information about it. I know a lot of this is posted also on our Andrews University website, so please continue to go there for more details as it relates to COVID-19. Well, at this time, what I would like to ask is final question. I don't see any other new questions popping up at this time. And there was a main big question about spring 2021. We've taken a lot of time talking about fall, but some of our students are wanting to know, what does spring look like? What plans are we looking towards as we're thinking about the spring semester? Thank you, Dr. Arthur.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy that you're thinking about spring semester. That means you're planning ahead. The plans are that for spring semester, they would resemble what we're doing for the fall semester, face-to-face, in person. And of course, we'll make accommodations for remote learning as needed. Of course, you would know that COVID-19, the landscape changes so frequently that we can't say definitively that we will be able to do in-person, face-to-face. We will have to be planning that way. If there is a second wave of infection, there's a second wave of the virus, we may have to modulate those plans. But for now, spring 2021, the plans are that they will resemble very closely what we are doing for fall 2020.
Great, thank you, Dr. Arthur. And kind of a little bit of a follow-up, if we didn't mention this before, about graduation for the 2020 graduates. Is there a ceremony, an in-person, face-to-face ceremony that's being planned for them as well?
So when we had the graduation celebration for May graduates, and we're doing the exact same thing for our August graduates. In May, the thinking was, well, by August, this thing might be, COVID-19 might be so settled, the curve is flattened, that we will invite those who were part of the May celebration to be for the in-person August graduation. But here we are, not flattened. We were thinking about maybe sometime in the fall semester, we would have a special graduation for those who were part of May and August. But here we are. We're still talking about 50% seating capacity. So if you think about it, our largest spaces can seat a couple thousand. And in those regular seasons, we had 3 and 4 graduations because of the number of persons to attend. Reduced that to 50%. And that means we have to double the number of ceremonies, move from 3 and 4 to 6 to 8. We're going to faint. Yeah. So we really do want to give you a chance to come back and have an in-person graduation. As it looks right now, the earliest we can do that will be sometime in 2021. And we can't say for sure that in 2021, we'll have had a vaccine and the curve will be so flattened that we can actually do it. We will still plan to find the space and the time for you to come back and celebrate in the most appropriate way. We don't know when for sure, so stay tuned. It's a moving target. We think we have it, and no, we can't do it. Change the date. No, we still can't do it. So when we have more definitive plans, we'll share those with you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Arthur. And with that, does that also mean that travel restrictions will most likely stay in place for the spring? Will the tours that our students normally and typically take part in, will those be canceled as well?
We know that the travel restrictions will be in place for the fall semester. And that's why once we have you to come to campus, we don't want you to be leaving and coming back. That's why we're ending the face-to-face classes right at Thanksgiving. When you go home for Thanksgiving, you do the rest of it remotely, because traveling would be a heightened risk. The way we're planning the spring semester, unless there is a vaccine or that the curve is flattened like it was back in fall of 2019, spring of 2021 will also have travel restrictions. So things have to change significantly for us to ease up on those restrictions and say, oh, now we can travel freely again. And the way things are going, more likely than not, we'll have restrictions in travel.
Thank you for bringing some more clarity to that. And our prayer is that we hope that God continues to intervene and we'll be able to do more, but with safety being in mind for all of our students and that being priority, we're planning ahead for them. Well, Well, as I take a look at the questions at this time, I don't see any new ones. I invite you to take a look. Many questions were answered in the Q&A section, so please take a look at that, as well as in the Facebook Live. There have been some questions answered there for our students. Dr. Arthur, was there anything else that you wanted to add before we close?
What I'll add, thank you very much, is to remind our students that the great value that they bring to Andrews. And in a recent email to faculty, I talked about, both Andrews and universities nationally are sort of plagued with two different viruses. COVID-19 is a virus that we can more easily identify and try to find a vaccine for it. We can look at it in a lab and know what it looks like. We have pictures of it. We say that's exactly what it looks like. This coronavirus, that's it. We can identify it. And we are plagued with that virus because of the tremendous negative impact it has on life and health. But there's a second virus, and it's a virus that's called racism. And racism has many tentacles. We could add to that sexism. We can add to that ageism. You could add to that all of those discriminatory practices that are aligned to how we treat the other. Nationally and at Andrews, that virus is there. And I'm saying to our students, the same level of care and attention that we are placing on trying to defeat this coronavirus and to find a cure for COVID-19. We have the same passion and the same determination to eradicate this virus called racism from our Andrews campus. I can't control what happens nationally. I can't control what happens at another university down the street from us. But with God's help, we'll control what happens on our own campus. And racism has no place on the campus of Andrews University. Those two viruses will use every ounce of energy, every bit of our resolve. I know it will test our resilience, but we're willing to put our resilience to the test and say, the virus called racism has no place here, and we shall defeat it. We'll use all of our energies. So please know that this is not simply a matter of talking about what we do for the coronavirus. Equally as importantly, we will address the issues of racism that you might have experienced or that you may experience as you interact with each other and our employees on this campus. We are determined. It has no place among us, and we shall root it out. This has to be a safe place for you to live, to study, to form friendships, to nurture your spiritual walk, to become closer to God. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that this environment is a good one, a nurturing one, and they say a safe one. And that safety is not just for your physical safety, it's for your emotional safety, your intellectual safety, your spiritual safety, your social safety. It has no place among us, and we shall defeat it. welcome home. As you journey back to Andrews, I can't wait to look you in the eyes. Maybe you won't be able to see my smile like you see it now, because it might be covered with a mask, but the smile is always there to say to you with open arms, virtual hugs, welcome.
Strong and powerful words, Dr. Arthur, and words of comfort that we are all needing at this time. So I want to thank you and all of our panelists for taking the time today to discuss with all of us the plans moving forward and the things that we need to keep in mind. And most importantly, this plan of care that we will have as an Andrews University campus for all of you, our graduate students, as we look forward to welcoming you back soon. So let us close now with a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you for every student who is watching this right now, for every student who is at home, at work, preparing for their return back to Andrews University in the fall. God, this journey is one of many winding turns in many places in which we may not know what comes next, but we trust in you and know that you are leading us through. So we ask, Lord, for your covering for all of our students, that you continue to keep them safe, that you keep them healthy, and that you keep them connected so that they may too be able to come here to seek knowledge, affirm their faith, and go back out to change this world. We love you, Lord, and thank you. In your name, amen.
Thank you very much.